The Galactic Council was old. It was composed of hundreds of alien races, some with 4 arms, some with wings, and others that looked like floating clouds of gas. They had ruled the Milky Way for 10,000 years. They believed they knew everything about war, technology, and power. But they were wrong. Deep in the Orion arm of the galaxy, a small blue planet called Earth had been quiet for a long time. The other aliens ignored the humans. To the Council, humans were weak. They didn't have the strongest shields, and they didn't have the fastest ships. The Council called them the Gardeners, because humans spent so much time fixing their planet instead of building empires. That was the Council's first mistake. The gathering storm. The war began with the Cracks. The Cracks were a brutal race of insect-like warriors. They didn't talk, they only consumed. They moved from system to system, destroying everything. One by one, the great alien empires fell. The Council's mighty fleet was being turned into scrap metal. "We need help," the High Chancellor of the Council shouted during an emergency meeting. "The Cracks have reached the inner rim. If we don't stop them, the galaxy will be silenced forever." An ambassador from a lizard-like race stood up. "The humans," he whispered, "they have stayed out of this war. They have been building something in the dark, near their moon. We should ask them." The Council laughed. "The humans? What will they do? Throw rocks at the Cracks?" But they had no other choice. They sent a message to Earth. The response. 3 days later, a message came back. It wasn't a long speech. It wasn't a plea for peace. It was just one sentence in simple English. "We are coming. Clear the path." The Council was confused. What did clear the path mean? They sent their remaining 500 ships to the Xylos system, where the Cracks were preparing for their final attack. The Cracks had over 5,000 ships. It was a suicide mission. The alien pilots sat in their cockpits, shaking with fear. They watched their sensors, waiting for the human fleet. They expected hundreds of small human ships to jump out of hyperspace. Suddenly, the sensors didn't just beep, they screamed. The arrival. The space in front of the Council fleet didn't just open, it seemed to tear. A massive black hole of energy appeared. And then, something started to push through. At first, the aliens thought it was a moon. It was too big to be a ship. It was a mountain of black steel, covered in thousands of glowing lights. It kept coming out of the portal, and it didn't stop. It was 5 miles long, then 10 miles, then 20. It was the UEB Leviathan, humanity's first and only true battleship. Unlike the sleek, beautiful ships of the aliens, the Leviathan was ugly. It was a jagged, brutal block of heavy metal. It looked like it was built to be hit and keep moving. On its side, the words "Never Again" were painted in bright white. The Council fleet looked like tiny toys next to it. One human ship had more mass than the entire Council Navy combined. The meaning of fear. In the Cracks command ship, the insect warriors stopped clicking. For the first time in their history, they felt a chemical reaction they didn't recognize. On Earth, it was called terror. The Leviathan didn't move fast. It didn't need to. It simply drifted into the middle of the Cracks fleet. A voice came over the open radio channels. It was calm, almost bored. It was a human voice. "This is Captain Sarah Miller of the Leviathan. To the Council. Please move your ships to the left. You are in our line of fire." The Council ships scrambled to get out of the way. As soon as the path was clear, the Leviathan lit up. Every alien ship has energy shields. The humans didn't care about shields. They believed in physics. The side of the Leviathan opened, revealing thousands of railguns, massive cannons that use magnets to fire solid metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. Toom, 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 toom. The sound couldn't be heard in space, but the vibration was so strong that the Council pilots felt it in their teeth. Each metal slug hit a crack ship like a falling star. Shields didn't stop them. The slugs were moving too fast. They went through the front of the crack ships and out the back, leaving nothing but fire and debris. In 5 minutes, 1,000 Cracks ships were gone. The turning tide. The Cracks tried to fight back. They fired their red plasma beams at the Leviathan. The beams hit the human ship's armor, melting the top layer of steel. But the Leviathan didn't care. Its armor was several meters thick. It just kept moving forward, soaking up the fire like a giant sponge. "They aren't even dodging," an alien pilot whispered in awe. "They don't have to. his commander replied. They built a wall of steel that flies. The Leviathan wasn't just a ship, it was a message. It told the galaxy that humans weren't gardeners because they were weak. They were gardeners because they knew exactly how much blood it cost to be warriors, and they had been saving all that energy for this very moment. As the Leviathan charged its main Nova cannon at the center of its bow, the galaxy finally understood. The humans hadn't been hiding because they were afraid of the galaxy. The galaxy should have been afraid of the humans. Inside the UEB Leviathan, the atmosphere was calm. While the rest of the galaxy was screaming in terror or cheering in hope, the human crew was focused. Captain Sarah Miller sat in her command chair, drinking a cup of lukewarm coffee. "Damage report," she said quietly. "Armor is at 98%, a young officer replied. "The crack's plasma beams are hot, but they are just scorching the paint. No hull breaches." "Good," Miller nodded. "Tell the engine room to keep us steady. We are the shield now, the secret weapon." On the other side of the battlefield, the Crack's hive mind made a decision. They realized their small ships were useless against this human monster. They signaled to the back of their fleet, where a massive organic shadow was moving. It was called the Star Devourer. It wasn't a ship. It was a living creature, grown in a laboratory, the size of a small moon. It looked like a mix between a squid and a worm, covered in hard, bone-like scales. Its mouth was a giant hole filled with thousands of glowing teeth that could chew through a planet's crust. The council pilots gasped. "It's over," the lizard ambassador cried over the radio. "The Devourer is here. No metal can survive its acid." The giant beast moved toward the Leviathan, its many tentacles reaching out to wrap around the human battleship. It let out a psychic scream that echoed in the minds of every living being in the system. Human stubbornness. Captain Miller watched the monster on her screen. It was horrifying. It was a nightmare from the deep dark of space. "Captain," the weapons officer said, his voice shaking slightly. "That thing is biological. Our railguns are going through it, but it's so big that it's just healing the holes. We aren't stopping it." The Star Devourer slammed into the Leviathan. The entire 5-mile-long ship shook violently. The monster's tentacles began to squeeze, trying to crush the steel hull like a soda can. Green acid started leaking from the beast's skin, hissing as it ate through the human armor. "Captain, the hull is groaning. We can't take this pressure." Sarah Miller didn't panic. She leaned forward. "They think because we have a big ship, we only know how to shoot. They forgot one thing about humans." "What's that, ma'am?" "We are very good at killing things from the inside." The boarding party. The Leviathan had thousands of small boarding pods. These weren't ships. They were basically pointed metal bullets, filled with human soldiers. "Launch the hell jumpers," Miller commanded. Hundreds of tiny pods shot out from the Leviathan, but they didn't aim for the Crack ships. They aimed directly at the Star Devourer's skin. The pods slammed into the monster, digging deep into its flesh. Inside the beast, the human soldiers stepped out. They were wearing heavy power armor and carrying flamethrowers and chainsaws. "All right, boys," a sergeant shouted over the suit radio. "This thing wants to eat our ship? Let's give it a stomachache it'll never forget." The humans began to move through the monster's body. They didn't use lasers. They used high explosives. They planted bombs on the creature's internal organs. They used chemicals that turned the monster's own blood into fire. The meaning of pain. The Star Devourer, which had eaten entire civilizations, suddenly felt something new. Agony. From the outside, the Council fleet watched in shock. The giant beast started twitching. It let go of the Leviathan. It began to thrash around, hitting its own Crack ships in pain. Blue blood started spraying out of its mouth. Then, the explosion started. Small fireballs popped out all over the monster's body. The humans had found its 3 hearts and placed nuclear satchels on all of them. Boom, boom, boom. The Star Devourer stopped moving. Its giant eyes went dark. The massive creature that the galaxy feared more than death was turned into a floating carcass in minutes by a few hundred humans with bad attitudes. The message sent. The Leviathan shook itself free from the dead tentacles. Its armor was scarred and its paint was gone, but it was still standing. Captain Miller opened the channel to the entire Crack's fleet. "Your pet is dead," she said, her voice cold. "Now, it's our turn. All batteries. Fire at will." The Leviathan turned into a sun. Every single gun, missile tube, and laser battery opened fire at once. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a harvest. The Cracks fleet, seeing their god beast killed so easily, finally broke. They turned to run. But the Leviathan was built for one thing: total victory. As the human ship moved forward, crushing Cracks debris under its massive hull, the alien council realized a terrifying truth. The humans didn't just have better technology, they had a darker way of thinking. They didn't play by the rules of the galaxy. They played to win. "Captain, the Cracks are retreating," the radar officer shouted. There was a brief moment of cheering on the bridge of the Leviathan. The alien council ships were celebrating, sending messages of thanks. But Captain Sarah Miller didn't smile. She looked at the tactical map. "Where are they going?" she asked, her voice sharp. The officer's face went pale. "They aren't going home, ma'am. They are heading for the Phaedra system. It's a civilian hub. No defenses. If they get there first, they will burn the planet before we can stop them." The Leviathan was a mountain of steel, but mountains are slow. The Crack ships were small and fast. "Calculate intercept time," Miller ordered. "If we go at maximum speed, we will arrive 2 hours after the Cracks reach the planet. By then, there won't be anyone left to save." The human gamble. The bridge went silent. The council ambassador's face appeared on the screen. "Captain Miller, you must let them go. If you push your engines that hard, the Leviathan will tear itself apart. You have already saved our fleet. Phaedra is a lost cause." Sarah Miller looked at the ambassador. "In human history, we have a saying: no one gets left behind. We didn't build this ship to watch people die." She turned to her chief engineer. "Chief, I need the overdrive." The engineer, a man with grease on his face and tired eyes, shook his head. "Ma'am, the overdrive is experimental. It uses the ship's gravity core to fold space. If it fails, we don't just explode, we vanish from existence." "Do it," Miller said. "That's an order." Into the fold. The Leviathan began to hum. It wasn't a normal engine sound. It was a deep, bone-shaking roar. Outside the ship, the stars began to stretch and twist. The massive battleship started to glow with a strange, blue light. Inside, the crew felt like their bodies were being pulled in 2 directions. Gravity went crazy. Coffee cups floated into the air. Lights flickered. The metal hull of the ship groaned, sounding like a giant monster screaming in pain. Hull integrity at 80%, 75%, 70%. "Hold it together," Miller yelled, gripping her chair so hard her knuckles turned white. Suddenly, with a sound like a thunderclap, the Leviathan vanished. The slaughter at Phaedra. In the orbit of Phaedra, the citizens looked up at the sky. They saw the red dots of Cracks ships appearing. The Cracks didn't wait. They began to charge their orbital lasers. They wanted to turn the green forests of Phaedra into ash. The governor of the planet closed his eyes and prayed. He knew no help was coming. The Cracks ships opened their weapon bays. But then, the sky didn't turn red. It turned blue. Space itself seemed to shatter like glass. The UEB Leviathan slammed back into reality, right in front of the Cracks fleet. It didn't just arrive. It arrived with so much force that the shock wave of its fold jump sent 3 Cracks ships spinning into each other, exploding instantly. The Leviathan looked terrible. Its outer plates were glowing red from heat, and sparks were flying from its side. But its guns were already moving. The wall of lead. The Cracks were shocked. How did this giant metal beast beat them here? They tried to fire at the planet, but the Leviathan moved its massive body, intentionally taking the hits meant for the civilians. "Target their engines," Miller commanded. "Don't let a single one escape." The Leviathan unleashed its flak cannons. Thousands of explosive shells filled the space around the Cracks ships like a cloud of death. Every time a Cracks ship tried to dive toward the planet, a wall of human lead stopped them. The battle was short and brutal. The Cracks were fast, but they were trapped between the planet and a very angry, human battleship. One by one, the Cracks ships turned into fireballs. The last remaining Cracks commander tried to ram the Leviathan in a final act of suicide. Captain Miller didn't even use a gun. She ordered the ship to move forward. The Leviathan simply ran the Cracks ship over. The 5-mile-long battleship crushed the tiny insect ship like a boot, crushing a bug. The aftermath. Silence returned to the Phaedra system. The planet was safe. The governor of Phaedra called the Leviathan. He was crying. "Thank you. Why did you do it? You almost destroyed your own ship for us. We aren't even humans." Captain Miller looked out of the window at the beautiful green planet below. She thought about Earth, and how many times humans had almost destroyed themselves before they learned to protect life. "Because," she said softly, "we know what it's like to have no one come to help. We decided a long time ago that we wouldn't let that happen to anyone else." As the Leviathan began its slow repairs, the rest of the galaxy watched the footage. They realized that the humans weren't just scary because of their guns. They were scary because they were willing to die for people they didn't even know. The true meaning of fear was changing. The galaxy wasn't just afraid of human weapons anymore, they were in awe of human will. The Leviathan limped toward the Aurelia station, the largest neutral trading hub in the galaxy. It was a beautiful place, shaped like a giant crystal flower. It was the only place with a dock big enough to hold a human battleship. As the massive ship approached, thousands of alien ships stopped to watch. They had seen the videos of the Leviathan crushing the cracks. Some aliens cheered, but others felt a cold shiver of jealousy. The hidden enemy. Among those who were not cheering was High Admiral Valerius of the Turan Empire. The Turans were proud warriors with golden skin and 4 eyes. For centuries, they had the strongest navy. Now, they looked like children compared to the humans. "The humans are a virus," Valerius whispered to his advisors in a dark room on the station. "Today they save a planet. Tomorrow, they will own us. We must show the galaxy that this Leviathan can bleed." Valerius had a plan. He didn't want a war, he wanted an accident. The welcome party. Captain Sarah Miller stepped off the Leviathan for the first time in months. She was tired, but she wore her uniform with pride. She was met by a group of council leaders, including Admiral Valerius, who smiled with all 4 of his eyes. "Welcome, Captain," Valerius said, bowing. "Your ship is a marvel. Please, let our engineers assist yours. We have special cooling gases that can fix your engine heat in minutes." Captain Miller was a soldier, not a politician, but her human intuition was screaming, "Thank you, Admiral, but my engineers like to do things the old-fashioned way, with hammers and sweat." "I insist," Valerius replied smoothly. As a sign of friendship, to avoid a political disaster, Miller agreed to let a small Turan team bring their cooling equipment onto the ship. The sabotage. Deep in the heart of the Leviathan, the Turan engineers weren't looking at the cooling system. They were carrying a small, pulsing device, a molecular dissolver. This device didn't explode. Instead, it sent out a high-frequency vibration that turned solid steel into brittle glass. If they placed it near the ship's main gravity core, the Leviathan would literally fall apart into dust the next time it moved. "The humans think they are gods," one Turan spy whispered as he hid the device behind a fuel pipe. "Let's see them survive a ship that turns to sand." The human pet. While the spies were working, they didn't notice a small shadow following them. It was a dog, a golden retriever, named Buster. Buster was the ship's mascot and belonged to the chief engineer. Buster knew something was wrong. These new aliens didn't smell like the crew. They smelled like copper and fear. As the spies finished their work and tried to leave, Buster didn't bark. He was a smart dog. Instead, he grabbed one of the spies' bags in his teeth and ran toward the security office. "Hey, stop that beast!" the spy yelled. The chase was on. Buster ran through the narrow corridors of the Leviathan, weaving between the legs of startled sailors. The Turan spies chased him, forgetting that they were supposed to be invisible. Buster burst onto the main bridge, dropping the bag right at Captain Miller's feet. Inside the bag were blueprints of the ship's core and a remote detonator. The confrontation. Captain Miller looked at the bag, then at the sweating Turan engineers, who had just run onto the bridge. "This is a very strange way to fix a cooling system," Miller said, her voice turning to ice. Security teams surrounded the spies instantly. Back in the engine room, the chief engineer found the device and deactivated it. Admiral Valerius, watching from the station, realized his plan had failed. He tried to claim it was a rogue group acting without his orders, but the damage was done. The council was horrified. The true fear. Captain Miller didn't call for a trial. She didn't ask the council for permission. She went back to her ship and opened a wide broadcast channel to the entire station. "Admiral Valerius," she said, her face filling every screen on Aurelia Station. "You tried to break my ship while we were resting from a war you were too afraid to fight." The Leviathan's engines roared to life. The ship didn't fall apart. It moved forward, its massive nose stopping just inches away from Valerius's private golden starship. "We humans have a rule," Miller continued. "We don't start fights, but we finish them. If I see another Turan engineer near my ship, I won't use my guns. I will simply park my ship on top of your palace." The galaxy watched as the mighty Turan admiral trembled. They realized that the Leviathan wasn't just a machine. It was a reflection of the people inside it, protective of their friends, but absolutely terrifying to their enemies. The humans weren't just warriors. They were the new masters of the stars, and they didn't need a golden crown to prove it. The cracks had retreated to the Zul Shadow Nebula, a massive cloud of purple gas and radioactive dust. Inside this nebula, sensors didn't work. Radars went blind. It was a place where ships went to disappear. The cracks had developed a new cloaking tech. Their ships were now invisible to the eye and to the computer. They were using the nebula as a base to rebuild their fleet. From there, they could strike anywhere in the galaxy and vanish before the Leviathan could arrive. "The blind giant. We can't see them, Captain," the radar officer reported, frustration in his voice. "The nebula is messing with our long-range scans. If we go in there, we'll be flying blind. It's a giant graveyard." The council leaders begged Miller not to go. "It's a trap," they cried. "They will surround you in the mist and pick you apart piece by piece." Captain Miller looked at the swirling purple cloud on her screen. "If we don't go in, they will come out stronger. We don't wait for the fire to come to us. We go to the source. Human, low-tech, genius." The Leviathan entered the nebula. Immediately, the screens turned to static. The mighty battleship was blind. The crew could hear the faint clink of space debris hitting the hull, but they couldn't see what was out there. Suddenly, a blast of red plasma hit the Leviathan from the right, then another from the left. "Return fire," Miller shouted. "At what, ma'am?" "There's nothing on the screen." The cracks were dancing around them, invisible and silent. They were mocking the giant. The Leviathan was like a lion being bitten by 1,000 invisible flies. "Bridge to engineering," Miller said into her radio. "Chief, the computers are useless. It's time to use the old Earth solution. Launch the Fireflies." 10. Lighting the dark. The aliens on the council ships, watching from a distance, were confused. What were Fireflies? The Leviathan opened its side ports. Instead of missiles or bullets, it released millions of tiny metallic spheres. These spheres didn't have guns. They only had one thing: paint. Millions of gallons of bright, neon orange fluorescent paint were sprayed into the nebula. It was a simple, human trick. The crack ships were invisible to sensors, but they were still physical objects. As they moved through the nebula, the sticky orange paint coated their hulls. Suddenly, the invisible crack ships weren't invisible anymore. They looked like bright orange ghosts moving through the purple mist. "Target the orange spots," Miller said with a cold smile. "Don't miss." The shooting gallery. The Leviathan didn't need radar now. The gunners looked out of the reinforced glass windows and used their own eyes. Boom, boom, boom. The railguns roared. Every time a ghost was hit, the orange paint exploded into a fireball. The cracks were panicked. Their high-tech cloaking was useless against a bucket of paint and a human's aim. The nebula, which was supposed to be the cracks' fortress, became their coffin. The Leviathan moved through the gas like a vengeful god, turning every orange light it saw into scrap metal. The predator becomes the prey. In the center of the nebula, the cracks had a massive, cloaking station that powered their fleet. They tried to turn it off and run, but the Leviathan was already there. "Ramming speed," Miller ordered. She didn't even want to waste the ammo. The Leviathan's prow, a solid block of reinforced tungsten, hit the station at full speed. The impact was so loud it felt like the stars themselves were breaking. The station shattered like a glass bottle. As the nebula cleared of the crack's influence, the galaxy saw the truth. Hundreds of crack ships were burning. The unbeatable stealth technology had been defeated by some paint, and a lot of human stubbornness. A lesson learned. As the Leviathan emerged from the purple gas, covered in orange stains and smelling of ozone, the council stayed silent. The humans had shown them that technology isn't just about glowing lights and fancy shields. It's about the mind that uses it. Humans didn't just build big guns. They found ways to make your best weapons look like toys. "Captain," the council ambassador whispered over the radio, "how did you know that would work?" Miller wiped a bit of sweat from her forehead and leaned back. "Back on Earth we have a saying, if you can't find the monster in the dark, turn on the lights. We just brought our own lights." The Leviathan turned its nose toward the next system. The war wasn't over, but the cracks were starting to realize that there was no place in the galaxy where they could hide from humanity. The Galactic Council looked at the sensor readings of the Soul Crack system and gave up. "It is impossible," the Lizard ambassador sighed. "The temperature at the fortress is 10 times hotter than the melting point of human steel. Even the Leviathan will turn into liquid metal before it gets close enough to fire its guns." Captain Sarah Miller sat in the dark of her ready room. She wasn't looking at weapon specs. She was looking at a history book about old Earth. "The Iceman cometh. We aren't going to fight the heat," Miller told her officers an hour later. "We're going to ignore it." The crew looked confused. The ship was made of metal. Metal melts. It was simple physics. "Chief," Miller turned to the engineer, "how much liquid nitrogen and coolant do we have in the lower decks?" "Enough to freeze a small ocean, ma'am." "Why?" "I want you to pump it into the honeycombs, those hollow spaces between the inner and outer hull. I want the Leviathan to be a flying icebox." The frozen giant. As the Leviathan approached the red sun, the galaxy watched in horror. The ship began to glow, but it wasn't glowing from heat, it was glowing from a thick, white mist. The humans had wrapped their ship in a thermal blanket of frozen gases. As the sun's heat hit the ship, the gases evaporated, creating a protective cloud around the hull that carried the heat away. Inside, the crew was shivering. They were wearing heavy winter coats and gloves. The temperature on the bridge was dropping to freezing levels. "Captain, my fingers are numb," the pilot chattered. "Better to be cold than to be ash," Miller replied, her breath visible in the air. "Keep us moving. We have a sun to break." The wall of fire. The cracks were stunned. Their sensors showed a giant ice comet flying directly toward their sun fortress. They fired their solar cannons, beams of pure sunfire. The beams hit the Leviathan, but the frozen hull swallowed the heat. Huge clouds of steam exploded off the ship, making the Leviathan look like a ghost rising from a boiling sea. "They are within range," the Cracks commander screamed. "Destroy them." But the Cracks had built their fortress to withstand heat, not impact. They forgot that humans don't just shoot. They use their ships like hammers. The solar breach. "All power to the prow," Miller commanded. The Leviathan stopped firing its small guns. It focused everything into its massive front shield. The ship wasn't going to shoot the fortress, it was going to ram it. With a sound like the universe cracking in half, the Leviathan slammed into the golden shell of the Dyson fortress. The human ship acted like a cold needle hitting a hot balloon. Because the Leviathan was so cold and the fortress was so hot, the metal of the fortress shattered from thermal shock. A hole the size of a city opened up in the Crack's defense. The cooling sting. Once inside the shell, the Leviathan was no longer being cooked. But the Cracks were everywhere. Thousands of small ships swarmed the battleship like angry bees. "Release the cold snap missiles," Miller ordered. These weren't explosive missiles. They were endothermic bombs. When they hit a Crack ship, they didn't blow it up. They instantly sucked all the heat out of the area. In the middle of a sun fortress, the Crack's ships suddenly froze solid. Their engines stopped. Their life support failed. The insect warriors, who needed heat to survive, fell into a deep sleep of death as their cockpits turned into blocks of ice. The sun's revenge. The Leviathan didn't stay to finish the job. They had planted a gravity anchor on the sun's surface. "Get us out of here, now," Miller yelled. As the Leviathan sped away, the gravity anchor pulled a massive loop of sunfire, a solar flare directly into the Crack's fortress. The Crack's own sun, the thing they used as a shield, became the weapon that destroyed them. The fortress melted, from the inside out. The silent victory. As the Leviathan jumped back to the safety of cold space, the crew finally turned the heaters back on. They sat on the floor, shaking, drinking hot chocolate and wrapping themselves in blankets. The council ambassador called, his voice trembling. You You used a sun to kill a sun. You turned your ship into an iceberg. Is there anything humans are afraid of? Captain Miller held her hot mug with both hands, feeling the warmth return to her skin. She looked at her tired, freezing crew, the gardeners of Earth who had just broken a star fortress. We are afraid of a lot of things, she said softly, but we are much more afraid of losing our freedom. And that makes us very, very dangerous. The galaxy finally understood. You could trap humans in the dark, and they'd bring the light. You could trap them in the fire, and they'd bring the ice. There was no environment in the universe that could stop them. The galaxy thought the war was won, but then the shadow attacks began. People on peaceful planets began to go mad. Machines started turning themselves off. It was the Hive Queen's psychic scream, echoing from the void. She was trying to tear the minds of the galaxy apart. We can't follow her, the council scientists said. The void is not space. It is a place of pure thought. Any biological mind that enters it will melt in seconds. It's like trying to walk through a dream while you are awake. Captain Sarah Miller looked at her ship. The Leviathan was a physical beast of steel and fire. How could it fight a ghost? The digital sacrifice. If a biological mind can't survive there, Miller said, looking at the ship's glowing AI core, then we send something that doesn't have a brain. She wasn't talking about a robot. She was talking about Project Mirror. Humans had been working on a way to upload a human consciousness into a computer. It was dangerous and had never been done fully. But it was their only chance. I'll do it, said Commander Elias, the Leviathan's tactical officer. He was a man who had lost his family in the first Krax attack. My mind is already focused on one thing, finishing this. Let me be the ghost. The transformation. In a silent room deep inside the ship, Elias was connected to the Leviathan's main computer. The process was painful. His memories, his feelings, and his soul were turned into lines of code. The Leviathan didn't just have an AI anymore. It became Elias. The 5-mile-long ship was now his body. The sensors were his eyes. The railguns were his fists. I can feel the stars, the ship's speakers whispered in Elias's voice. I can feel the heartbeat of every sailor on my decks. Into the void. The Leviathan used its gravity drives to tear a hole in reality. It didn't jump to another system. It slipped, sideways, out of existence. The void was terrifying. There was no up or down. The sky was made of screaming colors. The Hive Queen was there, a massive glowing brain the size of a city, protected by thousands of spirit cracks. You are nothing. The Queen's voice boomed inside the ship. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic hammer hitting the crew. The human sailors fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Their worst memories were being played back to them. The Queen was winning. The metal soul. But she forgot about Elias. She forgot that the ship itself was now a person. The Queen tried to attack the Leviathan's computer, but she found a wall of pure human spite. Elias fought back, not with guns, but with his own thoughts. He flooded the void with human history, the music of Beethoven, the sound of children laughing, the feeling of a warm summer day on Earth. The Queen, who only knew hunger and hate, couldn't handle the chaos of human emotion. She screamed in confusion. Now, Elias's voice roared through the ship. Fire everything. Because they were in a dimension of thought, the Leviathan's weapons changed. The railguns didn't fire metal slugs. They fired willpower. Bright beams of blue light shot out, hitting the Queen's brain. The shattered dream. The Queen's psychic shield cracked. She tried to pull Elias into the darkness, but the crew, the shivering, scared sailors began to sing. It was a simple, old song from Earth. Their combined voices gave Elias the strength to stay anchored. The Leviathan rammed the Queen's heart. A massive explosion of white light filled the void. The Hive Queen, the mother of all Krax, was erased from existence. Not by a bomb, but by the refusal of a human soul to give up. The return. The Leviathan popped back into normal space. The void collapsed behind them. The crew woke up on the floor, breathing hard. They looked at the screens. The shadow attacks had stopped. The galaxy was quiet. But there was a price. The Leviathan's AI core was silent. Elias? Miller whispered, her hand on the cold computer screen. There was a faint flicker of light. I'm still here, Captain, the ship whispered. But I think I need a long sleep. The stars are very loud. Commander Elias was gone from his body, but he lived on as the ghost in the machine. Humanity hadn't just built a battleship. They had created a guardian that would never sleep, never tire, and never forget. The victory over the Hive Queen felt hollow. As the cracks vanished, their final fail-safe activated. Deep in the galactic core, inside a hidden station orbiting the supermassive black hole, a singularity bomb began its countdown. If it exploded, it wouldn't just destroy a planet. It would create a chain reaction that would swallow the entire Milky Way. We can't get there, the council leaders wept. The gravity at the center of the galaxy is too strong. No ship can escape the pull. It is a one-way trip. Captain Sarah Miller looked at her crew. They were tired. The Leviathan was covered in scars. Commander Elias, now the soul of the ship, flickered on the screen. "I can do it, Captain," Elias whispered. "I am the ship now. I don't need to come back." The long walk. The Leviathan turned its nose toward the bright, swirling center of the galaxy. Every other alien race watched from their home planets. They knew that the humans were going to try the impossible. As they got closer, the gravity became a monster. It felt like invisible hands were trying to tear the ship apart. The clocks on the ship started to slow down. Time was breaking. "Captain," Elias said, his voice echoing through the halls. "The crew needs to leave. I can fly the rest of the way alone." "Not," Miller shook her head. "We started this together, Elias. We'll see it through. Launch the escape pods for anyone who wants to go. But I'm staying." Not a single sailor left. They were humans. They were too stubborn to quit. The heart of darkness. The Leviathan reached the crack station. It was a jagged needle of black glass, hanging on the edge of the great black hole. The singularity bomb was glowing, with a terrifying violet light. The countdown showed 2 minutes. "We can't disarm it," the chief engineer shouted over the roar of the engines. The cracks locked the code with their own DNA. "It's a dead man's switch." Miller looked at the black hole, the great maw that eats stars. "We don't need to disarm it. We just need to move it." The greatest sacrifice. The Leviathan extended its massive docking claws. It grabbed the crack station. The ship's engines screamed. They were fighting the gravity of 1 billion suns. "Elias, push us in," Miller commanded. The Leviathan didn't try to fly away. It turned its engines toward the galaxy and pushed inward, toward the center of the black hole. "If we can push the bomb deep enough into the event horizon," Elias explained, "the explosion will be trapped inside the black hole. The galaxy will be safe, but we will be gone." The final message. As the ship crossed the point of no return, the screens filled with static. The light of the galaxy began to fade into a single, tiny dot. Captain Miller opened a final channel to the Galactic Council. "This is the UEB Leviathan," she said, her voice calm and clear. "The bomb is secure. The threat is over. Tell the people of Earth. Tell them we fixed the garden." The council ambassador was crying. "Why? Why do you always do this for us?" Miller smiled. It was a small, tired smile. "Because someone had to. And humans are very good at doing the things no one else will." The spark in the dark. The Leviathan plunged into the darkness. The bomb exploded, but the black hole swallowed the fire. The chain reaction was stopped. The galaxy was saved. For a moment, there was a bright flash of white light at the center of the Milky Way, a new star that burned for only a second. Then, there was only silence. Epilogue, the legend. 100 years later, the galaxy is at peace. The cracks are a memory. The Galactic Council has changed its name to the Terran Union in honor of the race that saved them. In the center of the council plaza stands a statue. It isn't a statue of a king or a god. It is a giant, 5-mile-long model of a blocky, ugly battleship made of steel. Children from 1,000 different worlds visit the statue. They touch the cold metal and read the words carved at the base in simple English. They were the first to arrive, and the last to leave. They taught us that the true meaning of fear is not death, it is the choice to do nothing. Remember the humans. Somewhere, in the deep dark of the universe, some say they can still hear a faint radio signal, a heartbeat of a ship that refuses to die, drifting in the silence of the stars, watching over the garden they saved.